Right. Like to welcome everyone to WCAG 2.2A through AAA What's New, and Happy New Year. It's a wonderful new year to go into with some great new accessibility criterion through the WCAG. Our company is Digital Accessibility by WeCo. Just a quick disclaimer that I have to read. The information that's found in this presentation include tips based upon the experiences and opinions of digital accessibility by WeCo staff and should not be construed as legal advice. Regarding the development and implementation of digital accessibility practices, it is advisable to seek the advice of qualified legal counsel. The information in this presentation is the property of the Wehrman Collaborative LLC, which is our fancy name. Please ask us before distributing this information, and you can do that by either contacting Ellen, who's in this webinar, or contacting us at accessinfo, ACCESSINFO @theweco.com. Thank you. Accessibility note. This presentation includes built-in audio description for non-visual users as part of the narration. So this slide shows the title of today's presentation with WeCo's logo and the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, or IAAP member logo. The WeCo logo is repeated on most slides in this presentation. So on the call with us today, your teachers include myself. My name is Lynn Wehrman. I am the president and founder of Digital Accessibility by WeCo. And because she knows way more about WCAG than I do, we have Director of Accessibility Services, Sue-Ann Rodriguez, with us. And we're delighted to have Chad Cook, WeCo subject matter expert, who is going to be with us as well, bringing some user perspective to the presentation today. A little bit more about our company. At WeCo, we are qualified experts with a mission. WeCo is a company of digital accessibility professionals with the mission of putting you in touch with subject matter experts who live with disabilities. We're members of the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, and we also provide our own rigorous training requirements for our people. The slide shows the IAP logo. It also shows a WeCo accessibility specialist using screen magnification software in an accessibility audit with the terms, with the words, because simulations can't replace human experience. What we do, we offer manual accessibility audit services that can help your team understand which areas of your project meet and do not meet accessibility requirements. We also provide customized recommendations on how to fix accessibility issues. Our hallmark is that we teach you how to fix your own website so that it is much more sustainable. Our testing and recommendations are based on the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.2A through AA, also known as WCAG or WCAG. WeCo also offers unique disability-focused usability testing services. We provide keen insights into how testers living with disabilities view your website or software by having them complete tasks to verify that your website and software truly works for them. WeCo testers live with one or more disability that encompasses cognitive, mobility, hearing, and sight impaired disabilities. We offer various consulting packages, training options. We also have just launched WeCo University. This is an on-demand training portal that just went out this month, and we're really, really excited to be offering that. So this slide shows hands resting on a Braille laptop. Just a few housekeeping things to make the webinar go smoothly. Remember to mute yourself. I can see that everyone has. If there's any noise coming from your microphone, our moderator will mute you. If you wish to use the chat box, please be mindful that the drop-down designation for everyone will broadcast your comments to the entire room. If you wish to reach us for assistance, please select WeCo moderator. Accessibility accommodations are available today. but they must be placed in advance through a registration process. Thank you. What we're going to cover today, just a quick summary. First, we're going to talk about the changes from 2.1 to 2.2. Then we'll cover the new success criterion in WCAG 2.2A through AAA. And finally, we will provide some resources you can check out for information on accessibility and how we can help your website software project become WCAG compliant. And most of all, we are going to be including the insights of real users who live with disabilities with today's information. This slide shows a photo of 3 people listening to a presentation. We will answer questions at the end, but if you want to pop anything into the chat box as we go along, please do. So this first section, we're going to look at the changes from 2.1 to WCAG 2.2. And I am going to be doing a quick introduction, and then I'll be wrapping Chad and Sue-Ann into the discussion today as we go through the criterion. First, why don't we discuss what WCAG is? For those of you who are new to this concept, it is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which were developed by the Web Accessibility Initiative, or WAI, of the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C. This is an independent group of web professionals who focus on increasing accessibility and usability for the web worldwide. WCAG is actually not a law. It is a list of extremely specific code and content management suggestions for improving digital accessibility for users with disabilities. There are 13 guidelines, each of which is testable success criteria. WCAG 2.2 is the most recent version recommended by the W3C, and it expands upon version 2.1 with more success criteria and removal of outdated criteria. The success criteria are divided into 3 levels, A, AA, and AAA. The more letters, the more inclusive the success criteria. What makes WCAG so significant regarding US and international accessibility law is that it's universally viewed as an extremely reliable guideline. On this slide, we are showing the W3C logo. So we're going to move into the first success criterion. The 2.1 success criteria are essentially the same in 2.2, with the exception of criterion 4.1.1 parsing, which is now considered obsolete and removed from the WCAG. And at this point, I'm going to ask Sue-Ann if she can explain a little bit about what parsing is for those of us that may not be that tech savvy, and why removing the parsing criteria was a good idea. Sue-Ann?
Yes. So basically, what is parsing? So this is the process of analyzing an HTML document and extracting its structural components, such as the tags, attributes, and content. And this is to create a structured representation of the document. So basically, it reads the browsers and assistive technology. The browsers read and parse the actual HTML code and get all the information that it needs to actually display every web page, for example. And then the following, did you want me to go on to answer the other question, Lynn, as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So why is moving this particular parsing criterion a good idea? So prior versions of HTML to HTML5 did not describe how invalid markup should be handled. So when the HTML5 version, they standardized how browsers should handle invalid markup. So this created a standard and a guarantee that if invalid markup worked in current browsers, it would be able to do that same thing moving forward. So thus the need for this particular criterion not being needed anymore. And also just with this, web developers and programmers are always encouraged to validate and to make sure that they're having proper HTML code outside of this particular criterion as well.
Thanks, Sue Ann. So on this slide, we are showing a laptop with code displayed on the screen. Right. So let's talk about the new WCAG 2.2 success criteria. This includes 9 additional new success criteria. All right. So as part of this, I want to introduce everybody to Chad Cook. Chad is one of our subject matter experts. He has also worked with us on our testing team over the years. So welcome, Chad.
Thank you.
Before we, first of all, I'd like to just ask, explain that Chad lives with a mobility disability that impacts fine motor skills. He uses different assistive technology to navigate websites. Chad, can you tell us more about your disability and how it impacts your computer use and what assistive technology you use?
Sure. So like Lynn mentioned, I have a motor-related disability. I'm paralyzed from the chest down. I have good use of my arms, but no use of my fingers. So I have to rely on pointer sticks or stylus. I put on my hands, and it allows me to poke at the keyboard, one at a time, unfortunately, which is kind of slow. So I use the keyboard to navigate using tab key. And then I also use speak recognition software, Dragon Natural Speaking, also as well to help me, with a lot of the typing and so forth, if there's a lot of typing involved. And both of those combinations, helps me get around the websites much quicker and easier than and I have a hard time using a mouse. So that's the other reason I rely on these other technology or programs and stuff.
Do you use a mouse at all, Chad?
I can a little bit, yes. My laptop, I have one of those flat pads. I can kind of move my hand over, but the combination of all three, it makes it go much quicker and easier because I might have a hard time. Some days might have a hard time using the mouse. So that's why I rely on speak recognition other days more than keyboard.
Okay. And if you have been, if you're in the Twin City area in Minnesota, United States, if you've been around our office, you may have seen Chad demonstrate his speech recognition software at events. So the first 5 new success criteria we're going to discuss today are especially helpful for people who live with mobility disabilities and who are primary keyboard users like Chad. So we're going to be integrating some of Chad's experiences into these. Also, just to let folks know that Chad is here to answer questions. Certainly, we'll be here at the end too if there's anything that you want to ask. So on this slide, we're showing a photo of Chad using a pointer stick and speech recognition software on his laptop. Okay. The first 3 new success criterion we're going to discuss are all related to keyboard focus. Let's define focus and focus indicators. When you use a mouse or keyboard, select an interactive element on a web page such as a link. The element has what we call receive focus. Other focusable elements include things like menu items, buttons, and form fields. Any element that has focus should have a visible focus indicator or a way to know that your mouse is on the thing you think it's on. Focus indicators are most often an outline around the element that has focus. They may also add an underline to an element or change the background color of an element. Focus indicators are especially crucial for keyboard-only users as they visually show which element is currently selected. The example on this slide are screenshots from the Americans with Disabilities Act website or ada.gov. The focus indicators on both examples are bright blue rectangle outlines surrounding the elements receiving focus. When a keyboard uses tabs to the home button on the ada.gov, they'd find the focus indicator is partially obscured, as shown in the first image on the left. While the item with focus is mostly visible, it is still considered partially obscured because the bottom edge of the focus indicator is hidden by the notification below it. This meets the success criterion of 2.4.11, focus not obscured, which is level AA. However, it does not meet the success criteria 2.4.12 of focus not obscured, which is level AAA. Now remember, AAA is more inclusive than AA. So you can meet lower criterion and not all of the upper criterion, and then depending upon your situation, your needs can be considered quote unquote ADA compliant. The second image from ada.gov shows an example that does meet these AAA criterion. Both the item receiving focus, which is a link labeled service animals, as well as the focus indicator are completely visible. Okay. Our next success criterion is another level AAA criterion related to focus indicators. It's criterion 2.4.12, focus appearance. 2.4.12 requires focus indicators to be a sufficient size and contrast. People who rely on keyboard navigation, as well as people who have low vision, will benefit from focus indicators that stand out. You may be wondering, what is sufficient size and contrast? First, focus indicators must be at least as large as the area of 2 CSS pixel thick parameter of the unfocused component or subcomponent. Indicators must also have a contrast ratio of at least 3.1 between the same pixels in the focused and unfocused states. So the example on this slide is from the W3C website, and it shows an example of a minimally thick focus indicator. We're showing two blue buttons with the text example, one of which has a 2 CSS pixel thick outline. This is sufficient thickness for this criterion. The indicator is also black against a white background, which has a color contrast of 17.36 to 1. This far exceeds the requirement of the contrast ratio of 3.1. Because the indicator is thick enough and has enough contrast against the background, it passes 2.4.12 criterion. So Chad, I was wondering if you could share with us, how does the size and color contrast of focus indicators impact your computer use?
Yeah, I've had a lot of issues with the size and the color. Sometimes I barely can see them, or it might be just like a fade dotted line around the link or the menu item. So it's hard to tell where I'm at, when I'm using the focus indicator, tabbing or so forth. And then it makes it really difficult. I've had times where I'd be going along, I can see it fine, and all of a sudden I just won't see it anymore. And so it gets me lost. I don't know where I'm at in the website. And it makes, it's really hard, especially on smaller checkboxes or forms even. Have a hard time if the line ain't clearly visible around the form box or form field. I may not know where I'm at, and I can't complete the form the way I want to because it's not telling me where I'm at. That's kind of the biggest issues. And especially drop-down menus are also a huge problem. I've had them skip drop-down menus many times. They will just go through the main menus and not bring up the drop-down. So it makes it difficult, especially larger, like e-shopping websites and so forth. When there's a lot of submenus, it makes it very difficult and takes a longer time for me to navigate them if it's not properly indicated.
So you're missing out on a lot of the shortcuts, like
Yes,
drop
very
off.
much. Yep.
Yeah. One thing that I was thinking about when we were discussing this yesterday is that I'm a mouse user. And I think that it's really easy for those of us who are mouse users is to not understand the almost physical disconnection that occurs when you're a keyboard user versus a mouse user. And this is purely my speculation. So Chad, if you've got a different viewpoint, let me know. But when I move my mouse over a screen, I don't really even look at the focus indicator because I just click on it and because I
Right.
that visual connection with my hand and my eye. And
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, and I think you prior to your accident, you used a mouse, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, that was many years ago, and
Right.
and of course things have gotten much much better. But yeah, even when I use speak recognition, if I say click on such and such link, it will also bring that focus indicator to that link or wherever I say where, so that also tells me that it properly clicked on that link or opened it or box or form field or whatever.
Yeah, and I've seen you demonstrate speech recognition software and you really just if the focus indicator isn't there, isn't prominent enough, you're really just guessing. And I would
Right.
imagine you probably are like, okay, I'll click to open this just to see if that's where the cursor
Right.
is, that kind of thing.
So yeah. Yeah. That's where a good search box comes in handy too as well. Search indicator. So
Yeah, and I think that, what straying slightly from the topic, we're at WeCo, we're huge proponents of good search boxes, making them prominent, making them, easy to use. Because across disability types, search boxes, and my disability, I was born with cognitive disabilities. Boy, that search box is important to me too. All right, so why don't we move on to talk about dragging movements? And Ellen is going to enact a little video for you. The next couple success criteria where we will discuss both impact people living with mobility disabilities again. So let's go over 2.5.7, dragging movements, and 2.5.8, target size, both of which are level AA. To demonstrate the success criteria, Ellen has put together this video of what dragging movements look like with just a simple pointer alternative. So this video shows a map of Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is where our home base is. So actually, our home base is Stillwater, Minnesota, which is actually about 45 minutes away from downtown Minneapolis. But anyway, this is on Google Maps. Pay attention to the lower right part of this video as this is where we will demonstrate dragging movements to move in and zoom out and compare it to the simple pointer alternative. So I'll let Ellen roll that. In the video, we see that you could click and drag the zoom bar up and down to zoom in and out, but you could also click the plus and minus symbol to achieve the same task. Some people living with mobility disabilities are unable to use a mouse to drag items, like Chad was just discussing. So the plus and minus symbols provide an accessible alternative to him. Chad, how does simple pointer alternatives to dragging movements impact your computer use?
quite a bit. The biggest thing here is having things properly labeled, like the plus and minus zoom buttons. So, or again, having the focus indicator on, make sure if you have a pop-up window or show it with a map that the focus indicator will go into that pop-up with the map so I can tab around with my keyboard. Or like I said, having everything labeled properly when I use my speak recognition. So I can say, zoom in, click zoom in, and then it'll zoom in for me if it's properly labeled. That's, yeah. And like I said, I can't hold down the mouse button and drag the pad like most other people can. So I have to rely on those functions to be labeled properly and useful to make it work.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that for those of us that are mouse users that we don't really have a concept of. So thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Right. Our next success criterion is 2.5.8 target size level AA. This criterion requires targets are at least 24 by 24 CSS pixels, or that they have sufficient space around them. A target is an element that people can click on with a pointer, like a mouse, or in Chad's case, a stylus pen. If a clickable element is too small or close together, some people with mobility disabilities, like Chad using his pointer stick, may not be able to click on it. On this slide, we're showing two buttons with the text submit that both meet the 2.5.8 success criterion. The first button is a square that is 24 CSS pixels on each side. The second submit button is smaller than the 24 CSS pixels, but there is sufficient space surrounding it. So Sue Ann, I'm going to ask you to jump in on this one. Can you explain more about why the second image still passes the success criterion, even though the button is smaller?
Yes. So as you just mentioned, Lynn, it talks about that you can meet this particular criterion if there's sufficient space surrounding the target. And so because they talk about regarding this criterion, if you have a circle and 24 CSS pixels diagonally, if you put that circle in the center of a target and the outer part of the circle isn't overlapping or intersecting any other targets or any other any other circles, then that would meet that criterion as well.
So Chad, how does target size impact your computer use? And I know we had, when we were prepping for this, you also talked about how it impacts your mobile phone use too. So feel free to comment on both.
Yeah, it can be like smaller features, especially at the footers of websites. Everybody has the smaller wordings of, sitemap and so forth, terms and all that. If they're really small, it's good to have a good focus indicator on them because might be hard for me to see or tell, the size of them, hard for me to click on them. And same with my mobile phone, I really have a hard time tapping on those smaller links. And it's hard for me to zoom in with my phone because I don't have full use of my fingers. So I can't zoom in those smaller buttons or links. It's just really difficult. Even with my stylus, I still find it very difficult touch, hitting those smaller buttons and so forth.
And I would imagine when you're out and about, you're probably not usually carrying your stylus.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So me and my big knuckles, I can accidentally bump a lot of different buttons or links that are so close and so small together. So it gets very frustrating. And I don't like zooming in on them because I can't see what's all there. If I'm zoomed in so far, using one of the accessibility features of zooming in. So yeah, it's very difficult both ways.
All right. Well, moving on. The next, meet our next user, which is me. So we had some of our certified test consultants lined up for this to represent the cognitive user in these criterion, and they were all booked on projects. So you got me. So the final four success criterion will make your website more accessible to people living with cognitive disabilities. So I live with a few cognitive disabilities that impact my computer use. First of all, I was born into a family where I and my four sisters were all born with different forms of epilepsy. And I also suffer from a major mental illness diagnosis. And that is something that usually puzzles people on why is that considered a cognitive disability that impacts computer use. I have a major depressive disorder, and when that depressive or disorder is really active, it can be very, very difficult for me to process information. So things like clear writing, white space, there again, having that search box accessible and easy to use are really key to making a website accessible to me. So while going over the criteria, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the success criteria and how they will help me and my particular disability. So we'll start with criterion 3.2.6, consistent help. I really love this one, and I particularly love what ADA.gov did on this as an example. So this is a level A. To pass this criterion, include help mechanisms in the same place, reoccurring when it is on multiple pages. A help mechanism can include contact information, such as an email or phone number of a help desk, a frequently asked questions list, or an automated chatbot. And yes, I love those. I use those. So I know they can drive people crazy, but they are useful to me. People who need help can find it more easily if it's in the same place. This is really important for people living with cognitive disabilities that impact short-term memory. I am one of those people. And I am somewhat joking, but not joking. If you just ask my staff, I've been having a lot of issues with my depression this month, as I often do in winter. I am forgetting a lot of things. So this is something that I'm exceptionally excited about with these changes. So let's take another look at ADA.gov again. We're showing two different pages from the ADA.gov on this slide. Both pages include a dark blue box in the top right corner of the page. This box contains contact details for the ADA information line, as well as the days and times that they're available. Not only is this information located on a prominent part of the page, but it is also consistently located in the same place on each page. As a result, it passes the 3.2.6 success criteria. Okay. Let's take a look at success criterion 3.3.7, redundant entry, level A. To pass this criterion, don't ask users to enter the same information twice in the same session to simplify processes with steps. So for example, many checkout processes include a button or check mark where people can select it to indicate that the billing and the shipping address are the same. That's an excellent way to simplify this and ensure that your users with cognitive disabilities don't need to type the address in twice. Why is this important? There are times when I run a company, I'm a person living with a disability running a company, I manage a lot of details throughout the day, and yes, sometimes it's something as simple as recalling my address can be a struggle, especially when I have a lot of things on my mind. So it's really important any way that shortcuts can make it easier and faster for me to get through forms without having to tax my memory so much. So on this example, there's a heading that says billing address, followed by the sentence, select the address that matches your card or payment method. There are two options, same as shipping address or use a different billing address. The first option is selected, which will eliminate the need for the user to enter the same information twice. Our final two success criterion are both related to accessible authentication, 3.3.A, level AA, while 3.3.9 is at a higher conformance level of AAA. To meet the AA criterion, don't make people solve, recall, or transcribe something to log in. Some people living with cognitive disabilities cannot solve puzzles, memorize a username and password, or retype one-time passcodes. In this first example on the slide, we're showing a login page that requests a username or email address and a password. If you had to memorize and type in the username and password, This login screen would fail both 3.3.8 and 3.3.9. However, if you're able to copy and paste your login credentials into text boxes, then this login screen would pass both criteria. And I have to say that that's one of my biggest pet peeves with how I get into Zoom. Sometimes it will not let me copy and paste passwords under certain conditions. So this is something that I can relate to. To meet AAA criterion, again, don't make people recognize objects or user-supplied images and media to log in. The example we're showing on this slide is a Google reCAPTCHA authentication that requires the user to select all of the items with an orange. While this would pass 3.3.8 AA, it fails 3.3.9 AAA because it requires the users to recognize objects. An example that I can give is that whenever there are like urban structures that I have to recognize, which of these squares has a bridge or a stoplight. I find those exceptionally confusing because the infrastructure kind of runs in together, like bridges kind of sometimes look like sidewalks, look like buildings. So just a little bit of insight on how that can be confusing. Now remember that these are two different criteria. You may meet AA in one and not AAA in that one, and vice versa. So at this point, we're just going to bring the presentation to a close and open the floor up to see if there are any questions for Sue-Ann, Chad, or for me. You can please feel free to pop them in the text box, and Ellen, our moderator, will read those out for you, or we're small enough here, you can certainly speak up. We'd appreciate if you identify yourself by first name.
All right, not seeing anything in the chat box so far.
Okay. All right. Or if anyone has any user questions or even things not exactly related to the content, we're here to answer questions. If you are formulating questions, I think what we will do is go through the remainder slides and pause and ask for questions again. That way, if people need to move on to the next thing, they'll have all the information.
And it does actually look like we just got a question in. We want to jump over to that. Question from Michelle: will new certifications be required for WCAG 2.2?
Well, the certification depends upon what you are trying to achieve. And Sue-Ann, I'm going to probably ask you to jump in on this too. If you need to fill out, for instance, a Section 508 VPAT, then it is likely that whoever you are selling to within the government would want you to complete a new VPAT. There isn't a universal certification for WCAG. I know a lot of accessibility companies make you believe that there is, but there isn't. You're either complying with a court of law requirements for website accessibility, and for most of us, that's under the Americans with Disabilities Act here in the United States. If you're a government, you are under Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So it really depends upon your industry, what you're trying to sell, who your customer is, and what they require. Anything to add on that, Sue-Ann?
Yes, I'd like to say, currently the VPAT does the most current version does not include the new 2.2 success criteria. So I'm not quite sure when that update will happen to the VPAT.
It would probably happen when the US Access Board adopts 2.2 A through A to AA or A through AAA, because they're currently at level 2.1, is that correct?
No, they're currently at level 2.0.
2.0. Okay, European Union's at 2.1. Okay. All right, any other questions?
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, hi Greg.
Hi, just a quick question. This one's probably for Chad, pertaining to speech recognition software. I know Dragon is generally considered the gold standard, but obviously there's been a lot of work done inside of Windows with voice access, as well as Google's Android and iOS tools with speech recognition software. Can you just sort of speak to the differences on a higher level in terms of how far advanced and built speech recognition software that's sort of built into the operating system is, as opposed to maybe a more expensive option like Dragon, and what are most folks using now from that perspective?
Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with Microsoft's or speech recognition. I've used it a little bit here and there, and they have gotten better through the years. And of course, if you use Windows, I think it's standard. It comes with it, so that's a cheaper end of it. Along with mobile devices, for speech recognition on my phone, I have an Android. The only time I really use the speaker is replying to an email or a text. Obviously, I just hit the little speaker button and say what I want to say for the text or email. Regarding navigation through my phone, I think Dragon Natural Speaking might have an app that that they might provide that kind of uses the same functions as a web-based Dragon. So I'm not 100%. I'm not really sure on that one. I haven't really looked into it, but I've seen it around, and I'm not sure the cost. I'm sure it's costs a little more. So yeah, regarding any other ones, I'm not real familiar with them. So I hope that answered your question.
Just a quick follow-up. I won't take too much time, but have you
Sure.
tried using voice access on Android, which is supposed to use your voice for basically controlling your phone in a lot of ways, much more
no,
so
I don't
than
think I have.
using Google Assistant.
Yeah. Maybe Google Assistants I might have. Yeah, Google Assistants I have. I have a Google Home, and then I have Google Assistants. Yes, I do use Google Assistants quite a bit.
Yeah, so I think voice access is supposed to even take it a step further than Google Assistant does.
Yeah, it's something I'll definitely have to look into. Thank you.
I know that, and this is during COVID. My neck went out and it made it impossible for me to type. And I was using the speech recognition software in Microsoft Office 365, and it was really an eye-opening experience that I really had to relearn what I was doing. It was so very different. And it was, I don't think I'm not a Dragon user, but it didn't seem to be quite as slick as the stuff Chad talks about, but it was workable and it was nice in a pinch.
Well,
So
and I know for Windows itself, outside of the Office ecosystem, they have improved their voice recognition. It used to, I think, just be called speech recognition, but it might also be called voice access now in the latest updates to Windows.
good question. Well, we're going to need to wrap up today. So let's talk about some next steps for you and some resources for you. First of all, we just want to let you know that we have a lovely online learning system called WeCo University that makes it possible for you to learn more from us at your own speed. This currently, it just went through soft launch. So if you would like to learn more about it, just email us at accessinfo@theweco.com. I can tell you it's extremely affordable, access to all of the learning classes for $4.99 a year or 2 years for $900. So it is designed to be very accessible. This slide is showing a woman seated on a couch wearing a headset and typing on a laptop. We also have free resources. We always say use our free stuff. So we have a free accessibility library, pre-recorded webinars and events, workshops, meetups, other events, blog posts pertaining to the changes in WCAG, and much more. Just go to our website, theweco.com/resources. And this shows a picture of a woman sitting on a sofa with bare feet typing on a laptop. You can also reach us directly through accessinfo@theweco.com if you're having trouble locating anything, and then join our email and blog list. We provide free and easy ways to stay on top of accessibility. That's part of our mission. A few times a month, you'll be notified about latest blog entries. And this covers anything from our own accessibility experiences to legislative updates. We help you stay on top of accessibility by keeping accessibility top of mind for you. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and for staying a little late. Thank you also to everybody who offered great questions. Feel free to reach out to WeCo Client Relations anytime, accessinfo@theweco.com or 855-849-5050 extension 1. We'll be sending out a recording of this by next week. Have an excellent weekend, everyone, and thank you.